I'm Lieutenant Colonel Anna Torrance, 39 years old, and I didn't inherit command. I earned it, hour by hour, sortie by sortie. For years I lived in the long shadow of my father, Rear Admiral James Torrance, the Navy legend every SEAL still quotes. I worked twice as hard to prove I wasn't just the Admiral's daughter, that my wings and my rank were mine alone. But when a SEAL team mocked me as Daddy's girl and dismissed every order I gave, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been underestimated or humiliated by people who thought your worth came from someone else? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground to earn respect, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about leadership, boundaries, and reclaiming your name. What happened next might surprise you. My earliest memory is the sound of boots on polished floors. Not my father's, though his were always the loudest, but the hundreds that passed through our base housing, each pair carrying someone who would eventually salute the man whose name I carried. Rear Admiral James Torrance. The legend. The standard. The shadow I'd spend my entire career trying to step out from under. I was 7 when I first understood what my father meant to these men. A SEAL team had just returned from somewhere they couldn't name, doing something they couldn't talk about. They gathered in our backyard for what my mother called a decompression barbecue. I remember one of them, a senior chief with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, crouching down to my level. "You know your dad's a hero, right?" he said. I nodded, though I didn't really understand what that meant yet. He pulled my entire team out of a situation in the Gulf that should have been a body bag operation. 8 of us came home because of him. That's when I noticed they all looked at him differently than other adults did. There was reverence there. Fear, maybe. Definitely respect. Growing up on naval bases teaches you things civilian kids never learn. You learn that rank matters more than age. That protocol isn't politeness, it's survival. That some conversations end the moment your father walks into a room. I learned to stand straight, speak clearly, and never, ever use his name as a shield. But everyone else did. Admiral's daughter became my first name somewhere around middle school. It didn't matter that I made honor roll every semester or that I lettered in 3 sports. I was always introduced as an extension of him. When I told my father I wanted to serve, he didn't smile. He just looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Navy." "Air Force." He set down his fork. My mother froze mid-sip of water. "Why?" "Because I need to know if I'm good enough on my own." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. That was his version of approval. The Air Force Academy was brutal in ways I'd anticipated and ways I hadn't. The physical demands I could meet. The academic rigor I could handle. What I hadn't prepared for was the weight of introduction. Every single instructor, every upperclassman, every peer eventually said the same thing. "You're Torrance's kid?" Then came the inevitable follow-up. Stories about my father I'd never heard, operations I couldn't confirm, legends I couldn't live up to. I stopped correcting people when they assumed I'd gotten in because of connections. Let them think it. Let them watch me outperform their assumptions. Pilot training nearly killed me twice. The first time was in the centrifuge during high-G tolerance testing. I grayed out at 8 GS, came back, and pushed to 9. The instructor pulled me out and dressed me down for risking unconsciousness. "What were you trying to prove?" he demanded. That I belonged there. That my wings wouldn't have an asterisk next to them. The second time was real. An asymmetric flap deployment during a training sortie in an F-16. I felt the aircraft yaw hard left, the stick fighting me, the ground rotating into my canopy. Training took over, throttle adjustments, rudder input, calculated breathing. I brought it down on a runway I barely had the glide ratio to reach. My hands didn't shake until after I'd completed the post-flight inspection. The incident report noted exceptional airmanship under emergency conditions. My father sent a 2-line email. "Read your report. Proud of you." Those 4 words meant more than the commendation. I made first lieutenant at 26, captain at 30. Each promotion came with the same whispered questions. Did her father make a call? Does she actually deserve it? I deserved it. Every single rank, every single rating, every single mission. But perception doesn't care about truth. By the time I made Major at 33, I'd logged over 1,500 flight hours across 3 aircraft types. I'd deployed 4 times to 3 different theaters. I'd led a flight that successfully prosecuted a time-sensitive target within a 90-second window. My efficiency reports were spotless. None of it mattered more than my last name. The Admiral's daughter stuck to me like a call sign I never wanted. In bars near base, other officers would buy me drinks and spend the entire conversation talking about my father. In briefing rooms, senior leaders would reference his tactics, his decisions, his legacy, then look at me as if expecting me to channel him. I'd given everything to the service. Missed weddings, funerals, relationships that couldn't survive the distance. I'd learned to sleep in 3-hour blocks, eat MREs without tasting them, and make life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. I'd earned my rank through competence, my respect through performance. But I was still introduced as Admiral Torrance's daughter before I was called Major Torrance. When I made Lieutenant Colonel at 38, I thought maybe the rank would finally outweigh the relation. Oh, 5 wasn't a participation trophy. It was a battlefield commission written in flight hours and mission success rates. My father called me that night. Not an email this time. Congratulations, Anna. Thank you. You've built something I'm proud of. I waited for the other shoe to drop. Some piece of advice, some anecdote about his own path. It didn't come. I mean it, he continued. You did this yourself. No one can take that from you. But they could overshadow it. And they would. The reassignment orders came through on a Tuesday. Joint Operations Base, multi-service integration, enhanced cooperation protocols. It sounded like every other interbranch assignment I'd done. Then I saw the unit I'd be coordinating with, SEAL Team 19. My father's legacy lived loudest in the SEAL community. His name was spoken there with the kind of reverence usually reserved for Medal of Honor recipients. To them, Admiral Torrance was mythology wrapped in operational history. I was about to walk into a room full of people who worshipped my father and had no idea who I was. I'd spent 20 years proving myself to people who saw me as an extension of him. I'd thought by now, at this rank, with this record, I'd finally exist independently. I was wrong. The night before I reported to the new assignment, I stood in my quarters looking at the row of ribbons on my dress uniform. Each one represented something I'd done, someone I'd been, some moment where I'd chosen service over self. But when I walked into that room tomorrow, none of them would matter as much as the surname on my name tape. I'd learned to live with being the Admiral's daughter. I'd learned to let my performance speak louder than my pedigree. I'd learned that respect wasn't given, it was confirmed through action. What I hadn't learned yet was what happened when people saw the relation and nothing else. When they looked at you and saw only a legacy, not a person. When your entire career became a footnote to someone else's story. I was about to find out. The difference was, this time I wasn't going to tolerate it quietly. This time, I wasn't going to let dismissal slide. This time, I was going to make them see Lieutenant Colonel Anna Torrance, not the Admiral's daughter. I just didn't know yet how much that would cost me. The Joint Operations Base was smaller than I'd expected, which meant everyone knew everyone's business. I reported at 0700 hours on a Monday that smelled like aviation fuel and fresh paint. The officer of the day processed my credentials with the efficient boredom of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Lieutenant Colonel Torrance, he read from my orders. Then he looked up, and I saw it, the flicker of recognition. Any relation to yes? His entire demeanor shifted. Not quite to attention, but close. It's an honor, ma'am. Your father's work in the Gulf is required reading in our naval leadership courses. I'm Air Force, I said. Of course, ma'am. Just meant, well, it's good to have you here. I'd heard some version of that conversation 500 times. It never got less exhausting. My quarters were standard O5 accommodations, private room, shared bathroom, a desk barely large enough for a laptop. I unpacked efficiently, uniforms pressed and hung, boots aligned, personal items minimal. The only photograph I set out was one of my flight crew from my last deployment. No family pictures. No reminders of the Admiral. The base operated on joint protocols, which meant navigating 3 different service cultures simultaneously. Army personnel handled base security. Navy owned the SEAL team operations and maritime logistics. Air Force, my people, managed flight operations and air support coordination. My role was listed as Air Operations Liaison Officer, which was military speak for make sure these different branches don't accidentally kill each other through miscommunication. I'd done it before. I could do it again. The first briefing was scheduled for 1400 hours in the Joint Operations Center. I arrived 15 minutes early, reviewed the operational summary, and took a seat near the front. Professional. Prepared. Unremarkable. The SEALs arrived exactly on time, moving with that particular confidence that comes from being very good at very dangerous work. I recognized the type, had worked with special operations teams before. They were competent, elite, and usually professional. Usually. Their commanding officer entered last. Commander Evan Riker, 05 Navy. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing textbook, his eyes sharp as he scanned the room. When his gaze landed on me, I saw the calculation happen in real time. New face. Air Force rank insignia. Last name on my name tape. Gentlemen, he said to his team, not breaking eye contact with me. Looks like we've got Daddy's girl reporting for duty. The room didn't go silent. That would have required people to have been quiet in the first place. But there was a shift. A ripple of awareness. A few barely suppressed smirks. I didn't react. I'd learned a long time ago that reacting to disrespect only confirmed it. Riker took his seat across the table. Lieutenant Colonel Torrance. We've heard a lot about your father. I imagine you have, Commander. Legendary officer. Absolute legend. Those Gulf operations, textbook material now. So I've heard. One of his men, a senior chief with arms the size of my thighs, leaned forward. Your dad pulled my instructor out of a hostage situation in '03. Man walked on water as far as we're concerned. He's retired now, I said. Still. Must be interesting, filling those shoes. I wear my own shoes, Senior Chief. That got a chuckle from someone in the back. Not a friendly one. The briefing began, led by an Army major who outlined the upcoming training exercise. Joint operations, cross-branch integration, simulated combat scenarios. Standard stuff, except the parameters put my air assets in direct support of SEAL Team 19th's ground operations. Which meant I'd be working with Riker. Frequently. When the major asked for input on approach vectors, I offered a tactical adjustment based on terrain analysis and aircraft limitations. It was a sound suggestion, backed by operational experience. Riker glanced at it, then waved it off. We'll stick with the original plan. It's worked before. The original plan doesn't account for the new radar installations in Sector 3, I said. My pilots would be exposed for an extra 90 seconds. 90 seconds is nothing. 90 seconds is everything when you're taking anti-aircraft fire, Commander. He smiled. It wasn't friendly. With respect, ma'am, this is a SEAL operation. We know what we're doing. The dismissal was casual, almost polite. That made it worse. I could have pushed. Could have pulled rank, we were the same grade, but I had seniority by date of rank. Could have escalated to the Army major running the briefing. I didn't. Not then. Sometimes you have to let people show you who they are before you decide how to respond. The briefing continued without my input. Every suggestion I made was met with either polite deflection or outright dismissal. Riker's team took their cues from him. If he didn't respect my authority, neither would they. By the time we wrapped at 1600 hours, I'd been effectively sidelined in my own operational area. I stayed behind as the room emptied, reviewing the flight plans one more time. The Army major approached, looking uncomfortable. For what it's worth, ma'am, your suggestion about Sector 3 was solid. But we're not using it. Commander Riker has a lot of operational experience. And, well, he hesitated. The SEALs have a reputation for knowing their business. So do my pilots. Of course, ma'am. I just meant, look, inter-service coordination is always tricky. Especially when there are legacy connections involved. There it was. The real issue. Major, I'm here because I'm qualified for this position. My father's career has nothing to do with my presence at this base. Absolutely, ma'am. No one's questioning that. But they were. They absolutely were. I spent that evening in my quarters, running through the mission parameters again. The original flight plan wasn't just suboptimal, it was unnecessarily risky. Those 90 seconds of exposure could mean the difference between a successful extraction and a downed aircraft. But if I pushed too hard, I'd be seen as the Admiral's daughter throwing around her father's weight. If I didn't push at all, I'd be failing my responsibility to my pilots. There was no good option. Just varying degrees of bad. A knock interrupted my analysis. I opened the door to find a young Navy lieutenant I vaguely recognized from the briefing. He looked about 25, maybe 26, probably an O2 with 2 or 3 years in. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Jake Moreno. I wanted to apologize for the team's behavior earlier." I studied him. His body language read as genuine, but there was something else there. Hesitation, maybe. "You don't need to apologize for your team, Lieutenant." Still, it wasn't professional. He paused. "Your father, Admiral Torrance, he's kind of a hero to a lot of us. I've studied his operations, read his after-action reports. The man's a tactical genius. He had good teams. He had great instincts. That operation in Kandahar province, the extraction under fire, that's taught at every Spec Ops school now." I knew the operation he meant. My father had walked away with a Bronze Star and 3 cracked ribs. He'd also never talked about it at home. "Lieutenant, was there something you needed?" "No, ma'am. Just wanted to say, it must be tough, living up to that legacy. But I'm sure you'll do fine." He meant it as encouragement. It landed like condescension. After he left, I sat at my desk and pulled up my father's contact information. I typed out a message 3 times and deleted it 3 times. "They don't see me here. They see you." No, that sounded like complaining. "Need advice on handling legacy expectations in joint operations." No, that sounded like I couldn't handle it myself. I closed the laptop without sending anything. The next morning, I ran into Riker at the base gym. He was finishing a workout, drenched in sweat, surrounded by his team. When he saw me, he stage whispered to the nearest SEAL, "Commander's girl getting in her morning cardio." The laughter wasn't malicious. That almost made it worse. They genuinely didn't think they were being disrespectful. To them, this was just banter. Just jokes. To me, it was death by 1,000 cuts. I completed my workout in silence, then headed to the flight line. My pilots were prepping for a training run, and I needed to brief them on the upcoming joint exercise. At least with my own people, my rank meant something. At least with my own people, I was Lieutenant Colonel Torrance, not the Admiral's daughter. At least that's what I told myself. The joint field exercise launched at 0500 hours on a Wednesday that felt like every other pre-dawn briefing I'd attended in my career. Cold coffee, colder air, and the kind of tension that comes from putting multiple service branches in the same operational space. I'd reviewed the mission parameters a dozen times. SEAL Team 19 would conduct a simulated hostage extraction at a mock compound 15 miles north. My pilots would provide aerial overwatch, close air support on call, and emergency extraction if the ground team got compromised. Standard joint ops procedure, clear communication protocols, pre-established checkpoints, mutual respect for each service's expertise. That's what should have happened. Commander Riker called an audible at 0430, 30 minutes before launch. He revised the insertion point, moving it 2 clicks west into a narrow valley that reduced my pilot's maneuver space and extended their exposure time. I found him in the operations center, surrounded by his team, marking up the digital map. "Commander, we need to discuss the insertion change." He didn't look up. "It's a better approach angle. Gives us cover from the ridgeline. It also puts my aircraft in a terrain trap. If they take simulated fire, they can't evade effectively. They won't take fire. We'll suppress before they arrive. You can't guarantee that in a training scenario. The Opfer has autonomy to adapt." Now he looked up, and his expression was patient in the way that made my jaw tight. "Lieutenant Colonel, I've run 3 dozen operations in terrain like this. This approach works. Not with the aircraft I'm flying. The F-16's turn radius in that valley will be fine. Your pilots are professionals, right?" One of his senior enlisted, a Master Chief with 20 years in, added, "Ma'am, the commander knows what he's doing. Maybe trust the ground element on ground tactics." The room had gone quiet. Everyone watching. Everyone waiting to see if the Admiral's daughter would back down or make a scene. I chose a third option. I'm logging a formal objection to this tactical change. It will be in the after-action report. Riker's smile was indulgent. You do what you need to do, ma'am. The exercise proceeded with his modified plan. My pilots executed professionally, threading that valley with precision that made me proud and terrified in equal measure. The SEAL team successfully completed their extraction, and by all measurable standards, the operation was a success. But my pilots had been exposed for an additional 112 seconds. I'd timed it. In a real scenario, that was 4 surface-to-air missile launch windows. That was enough time for a catastrophic failure. The debrief happened at 1400 hours. The Army colonel overseeing the exercise praised the operation's success, highlighted the SEAL team's tactical efficiency, and mentioned my air support as adequate. Adequate. I'd provided flawless overwatch while managing a flight pattern that shouldn't have been necessary. When it came time for lessons learned, Riker stood first. I think this demonstrates the value of flexible tactics. The original air approach was overly cautious, textbook, sure, but not optimized for the actual terrain conditions. When you're in the field, you can't just follow the manual. You have to adapt. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Several heads nodded around the room. The Army colonel made notes. Lieutenant Colonel Torrance, the colonel said. Any input from the air element perspective? I stood, keeping my voice level. The modified approach increased risk exposure for minimal tactical gain. In a live scenario, that exposure window could cost lives. I'd recommend we stick to coordinated planning rather than last-minute revisions. Noted, the colonel said, in a tone that meant it wouldn't be noted at all. Riker caught up with me afterward in the hallway. Alone now, without an audience. Look, I'm not trying to make this difficult, he said. But you've got to understand the SEAL community near your father. He was bold. He took calculated risks. That's how you win. My father also lost 3 men in Somalia because someone made an uncoordinated decision in the field, I said quietly. He never forgave himself for it. So maybe don't tell me what he would have done. Something flickered across Riker's face. Not quite shame, but close. I didn't know that. Most people don't. They just know the legend. I walked away before he could respond. That night, Lieutenant Moreno found me in the mess hall. I was eating alone, reviewing flight data on my tablet, trying to document exactly where the timing discrepancies had occurred. Ma'am, can I join you? I gestured to the empty seat. He sat with the nervous energy of someone about to say something they'd rehearsed. I wanted to say, what Commander Riker did today, changing the plan without coordination, that wasn't right. You were part of his team. Part of the operation. I was. But I'm also a naval officer, and that wasn't proper joint protocol. He hesitated. I admire your father's career, but I'm starting to think maybe the team leans on his reputation too much when it comes to you. Starting to think. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I made some assumptions when you first arrived. That you were here because of connections, not qualifications. I was wrong. It was the first genuine acknowledgement I'd received on this base that I might actually know what I was doing. I appreciate that, Lieutenant. For what it's worth, that valley approach was risky. My team lead even said so during prep, but Riker overruled him. Why? Moreno looked uncomfortable. I think he wanted to prove he could make the kind of bold call your father would make. Like he was showing you how it's done. So I wasn't just carrying my father's shadow, I was being measured against it, judged by it, and undermined because of it. That's not how command works, I said. No, ma'am. It's not. After he left, I sat in that empty mess hall and let myself feel the full weight of it. 20 years of service. 20 years of proving myself. 20 years of excellence that still couldn't outweigh 6 words. She's Admiral Torrance's daughter. I'd thought making lieutenant colonel would change things. That the rank would speak for itself. I'd been naive. The after-action report circulated 3 days later. I read it in my quarters with growing disbelief. The narrative had shifted entirely. Where I'd logged concerns about tactical coordination, the report framed it as inter-service communication challenges. Where I'd documented increased risk exposure, it noted adaptive tactical decision-making by ground element leadership. My formal objection was mentioned in a single line. Air element raised procedural concerns, addressed through post-operation coordination. I hadn't addressed anything. I'd been dismissed. The final paragraph praised Commander Riker's decisive leadership and recommended his tactical approach as a model for future joint operations. I read it twice, then pulled up my mentor's contact information. Colonel Sarah Mendoza had been my commanding officer 5 years ago, had written one of my promotion recommendations, had told me once that I reminded her of why she'd stayed in the service. I called her personal number. She answered on the third ring. "Anna, been wondering when I'd hear from you. You heard about the joint assignment? Heard you were working with a SEAL team. Heard it was going about as well as expected." I briefed her on the exercise, the report, the pattern of dismissal. She listened without interrupting, which was how I knew it was bad. "Sarah, I'm doing everything right. Following protocol, offering solid tactical input, maintaining professionalism. And I'm still getting undermined at every turn. Because they don't see you, Anna. They see the Admiral. I know that. I've known that my entire career. But at this rank, at this level of responsibility, it doesn't matter what rank you are if they've already decided who you are." I closed my eyes. "So what do? You stop trying to prove you're not your father's daughter and start proving you're your own kind of commander. Stop playing defense. Stop accepting their frame. I'm already requesting formal reviews, logging objections, that's defense. That's reacting to their disrespect by asking them to pretty please respect you. You need to change the entire dynamic." "How?" "Stop asking for a seat at their table. Build your own table and make them ask for a seat at yours." After we hung up, I pulled up the personnel database and started researching. There were 3 joint task forces operating in the region, each with different command structures. 2 were Navy-led. 1 was Air Force-led, Joint Task Force Peregrine, overseen by Air Combat Command. Under Peregrine's operational umbrella was Unit 97, a classified rapid response air task force that had been without permanent command for 6 months. The unit specialized in high-risk aerial operations, supporting special operations forces across all branches, including SEALs. I spent the next 4 hours drafting a transfer request. Not away from joint operations toward them. Toward a position where I wouldn't be coordinating with the SEALs. I'd be commanding the assets they'd need to survive. I submitted the request at 2300 hours, marked it urgent, and copied my chain of command all the way up to the 2-star general who oversaw Air Force Special Operations. Then I went asleep with the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't running from the problem. I was repositioning to solve it. In chess, sometimes you sacrifice a piece to control the board. I was sacrificing proximity and comfort for something more valuable. Authority that couldn't be questioned. Command that couldn't be dismissed. The kind of position where my father's name wouldn't matter because my capabilities would be undeniable. The kind of role where they'd have to salute me first and think about my last name second. I didn't know if the transfer would be approved. But I knew I couldn't keep fighting the same fight in the same way. Sarah was right. I needed to change the game entirely. The response came faster than I expected. 72 hours after I submitted my transfer request, I received orders to report to Air Combat Command Headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for an interview regarding Unit 97 Command. I didn't tell anyone on base I was leaving. Didn't give Riker or his team the satisfaction of knowing they'd driven me out. As far as they knew, I was taking a week of personal leave. The interview was conducted by Major General Isaac Keller, a 2-star with a reputation for running the tightest special operations air units in the force. He'd flown combat missions in 3 different conflicts, commanded at every level from flight to wing, and had 0 patience for politics. He reviewed my file in silence while I sat at attention across from his desk. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, he looked up. "You've got an exemplary record, Lieutenant Colonel. Top-tier efficiency reports, multiple combat deployments, weapons school graduate, safety record that's basically spotless." He paused. "You're also Admiral James Torrance's daughter." "Yes, sir." "That going to be a problem?" "It has been everywhere else, sir." He almost smiled. Fair answer. Why Unit 97? Because it's the position where my capabilities matter more than my pedigree. Unit 97 operates independently, reports directly to Air Combat Command, and provides critical support to SF operations across branches. It requires someone who understands joint operations, can coordinate under pressure, and won't hesitate when lives are on the line. And you think you're that person? I know I am, sir. He pulled up something on his computer, turned the screen toward me. It was my formal objection from the joint exercise, the one that had been reduced to a single line in the official report. Your concern about the Valley approach, you were right. We ran the same scenario through our modeling software. In a live environment, estimated aircraft loss probability would have increased by 43%. I kept my expression neutral. The ground commander disagreed with my assessment, sir. The ground commander was wrong. But he had the louder voice and the better reputation, so his version made the report. Keller leaned back. Unit 97 doesn't work that way. You'll have operational authority over every mission profile. If you say an approach is too risky, it doesn't happen. If you recommend a tactical adjustment, it gets implemented. But that also means every failure lands on your shoulders. Every loss is your responsibility. I understand, sir. Do you? Because I've read your file, Colonel. You're competent, dedicated, and professional. But you've spent your entire career trying to prove you're not trading on your father's reputation. Unit 97 isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about mission success, full stop. Can you command without that chip on your shoulder? The question hit harder than I expected. I thought about every briefing where I'd second-guessed myself, every decision where I'd wondered if I was being too cautious to avoid seeming nepotistic, every moment I'd held back because I was afraid of being seen as the Admiral's daughter throwing her weight around. Sir, that chip has made me sharper, more careful, more thorough. I've never had the luxury of assuming my authority was legitimate. I've had to earn it every single day. That won't change in Unit 97. But it also means I'll never make a careless decision, never cut corners, never compromise mission integrity for ego. Keller studied me for a long moment. Unit 97's last commander got removed because he couldn't work with other branches. Treated SEAL teams like they were subordinate rather than coordinated. It created friction that compromised operations. I won't have that problem, sir. Why not? Because I know exactly what it feels like to be dismissed by people who should respect you. I won't do that to anyone else. He closed my file. Command of Unit 97 comes with a caveat. You'll be attached to Joint Task Force Peregrine, which means coordinating with the same Special Operations Forces you just left, including SEAL Team 19. Your former colleagues will be working under your operational umbrella. I understood what he wasn't saying. This was a test. Could I command professionally with people who'd disrespected me? Could I separate personal history from operational necessity? That won't be a problem, sir. It better not be. Because if I give you this command and you use it to settle scores, I'll relieve you so fast you'll get whiplash. Unit 97 is too critical to become someone's personal vendetta. I'm not interested in revenge, sir. I'm interested in running the best tactical air operations unit in the Air Force. Good. Because that's what I need. He stood, and I rose with him. You're approved for command of Unit 97, effective immediately. You'll report back to your current base-to-out process, then you've got 2 weeks to assume command and integrate with Peregrine's operational structure. Questions? No, sir. He extended his hand. Don't make me regret this, Colonel. I won't, sir. I left his office with orders that changed everything. Not just my assignment, my entire relationship with the service that had defined my adult life. For 20 years, I'd been trying to prove I belonged. Now I had a command where belonging wasn't negotiable, where my authority was absolute within my operational sphere, where nobody could dismiss me as daddy's girl because I'd be the one controlling whether their mission succeeded or failed. The flight back felt different. I wasn't returning to the Joint Ops Base as a sidelined liaison officer. I was returning to outprocess before taking command of one of the most elite units in Air Force Special Operations. I thought about calling my father, telling him about the assignment. He'd be proud. Unit 97 had a legendary reputation in special operations circles. But this wasn't about making him proud. This was about finally, definitively, separating my career from his shadow. I'd tell him after I'd proven I could do it. When I arrived back at base, Lieutenant Moreno was the first person I encountered. He was heading toward the gym, saw me, and stopped. "Ma'am, didn't expect you back until next week. Plans changed. I need to see the personnel office about outprocessing." His expression shifted. "You're leaving. New assignment. Because of what happened with the exercise? Because an opportunity became available that's a better fit for my skill set." He looked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't figure out how. "Finally, I hope wherever you're going, they appreciate what you bring to the table." They will. I outprocessed over the next 3 days. Turned in my building access, closed out my accounts, packed my quarters. Nobody asked where I was going. That information was classified above most people's clearance level. Commander Riker found me on my last day, in the parking lot loading boxes into my vehicle. "Heard you're transferring out." "That's correct." "Look, about the exercise, I may have been too aggressive with the tactical changes. Your concerns were valid." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get from him. "It's fine, Commander. Water under the bridge." "Where are you headed?" "Can't discuss it." He nodded, not pressing. "Well, good luck. For what it's worth, you're a solid officer. I hope your next assignment sees that." I almost believed he meant it. As I drove away from that base for the last time, I watched it disappear in my rearview mirror. That chapter was closed. The dismissals, the condescension, the constant shadow of my father's legacy, I was leaving all of it behind. What I didn't know yet was that I wasn't leaving it behind at all. I was positioning myself to confront it on my terms, with my authority, in a way that would force everyone who'd ever dismissed me to reconsider their assumptions. But that realization was still 2 weeks away. For now, I just drove toward Unit 97, toward a command that was entirely mine, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Unit 97 was headquartered at Nellis Air Force Base, operating out of a secured compound that didn't appear on standard base maps. The unit consisted of 16 pilots, 32 support personnel, and enough classified technology to make most defense contractors weep with envy. My first day as commander started at 0600 hours with a full unit briefing. Every member of Unit 97 assembled in the operations center while I stood at the front, wearing my rank-like armor. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Anna Torrance, and I'll be commanding this unit effective immediately." I didn't mention my father. Didn't acknowledge the legacy. Started fresh. Unit 97's mission is providing rapid response air support for special operations across all service branches. That means we're the best trained, fastest responding, most tactically flexible air unit in the force. Or we will be. I spent the next hour outlining my command philosophy: excellence without exception, cross-training across platforms, integrated communication protocols, and a decision-making structure that valued input from every level. My second-in-command, Major David Chin, approached afterward. "Solid brief, ma'am. The unit's been without permanent leadership for 6 months. They needed that clarity. What's the actual capability status? On paper, we're at 93% readiness. In reality, closer to 70. The lack of command created mission planning inefficiencies, training gaps, and coordination issues with our SOF partners. How long to get to actual 93%? 3 months if we push hard. You've got 6 weeks. Joint Task Force Peregrine has operations scheduled, and we're their primary air asset." Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw the calculation behind his eyes. "That's aggressive, ma'am. That's the standard. Make it happen." Over the next 10 days, I ran Unit 97 harder than it had been run in years. Extended training flights, integrated simulation scenarios, cross-branch coordination exercises with Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and yes, SEAL teams, though not Team 19. Not yet. I learned every pilot's strengths and weaknesses, every aircraft's quirks, every scenario's critical decision points. I flew missions myself, demonstrating rather than just directing. By the end of week 2, the unit's efficiency metrics had improved by 18%. The notification came on a Thursday. Joint Task Force Peregrine's next operation cycle was beginning. All attached units would conduct integrated planning starting Monday. And SEAL Team 19 had been reassigned to Peregrine's operational roster. Major Chen brought me the information in my office, watching my face carefully. Your former colleagues, ma'am. I'm aware. Will that be a problem? No. He waited, clearly expecting more explanation. Major, I spent the last 3 months being dismissed by people who should have known better. That ends now. Not because I'm angry, because Unit 97's mission requires absolute operational authority. If they respect that, we'll work together fine. If they don't, they'll learn. Understood, ma'am. The first joint planning session was scheduled for Monday at 1300 hours. I spent the weekend reviewing SEAL Team 19's recent operational history, identifying their tactical patterns, and preparing recommendations that would improve their mission success while showcasing Unit 97's capabilities. This wasn't about revenge. It was about establishing a professional relationship from a position of strength. At least that's what I told myself. Monday arrived with clear skies and the kind of dry heat that made Nellis feel like the surface of Mars. I dressed in my standard duty uniform, checked my rank insignia twice, and arrived at the Joint Operations Center 15 minutes early. The room was set up for a large briefing, tiered seating, digital displays, enough space for 50 personnel. I took my position at the command table in front, reviewing the agenda on my tablet. SEAL Team 19 arrived at 12:55. I heard them before I saw them, familiar voices, familiar confidence, familiar disregard for anything resembling quiet professionalism. Commander Riker led the group, followed by his senior enlisted and junior officers. Lieutenant Moreno was among them, looking more seasoned than he had 3 months ago. None of them noticed me at first. They were too busy settling into seats, continuing whatever conversation they'd been having in the hallway. Heard Unit 97 got a new commander finally, one of the senior chiefs was saying. Supposed to be some hard ass from ACC. Good. Last guy was a disaster, Riker replied. Treated us like we were subordinate rather than coordinated. Made everything difficult. Moreno spotted me then. I watched recognition cross his face, followed by something that looked like concern. Commander, he said quietly. Riker looked up. Saw me sitting at the command table. His expression went through several rapid transitions: surprise, confusion, calculation. Lieutenant Colonel Torrance. Didn't expect to see you here. I command Unit 97, Commander. This is exactly where you should expect to see me. The room's ambient noise dropped several decibels. The other SEALs were registering what Moreno had already understood. The officer they'd spent months dismissing was now the air commander they'd be depending on. Riker recovered quickly, I'd give him that. Congratulations on the new assignment, ma'am. Thank you. Before anyone could say more, Major General Keller entered the room. Every person in the briefing came to attention instantly. He moved to the front, stood beside me, and surveyed the assembled personnel with the kind of gaze that made seasoned combat veterans feel like nervous privates. Seats, he commanded. Everyone sat. Joint Task Force Peregrine conducts the highest risk, highest value operations in our operational theater. Success requires absolute coordination between ground and air elements. Failure costs lives. He gestured toward me. Lieutenant Colonel Torrance commands Unit 97, which means she commands every aspect of air operations supporting your missions. Her authority in the air is absolute. Her tactical decisions are final. If she says an approach is too dangerous, you don't do it. If she recommends an alternative, you take it seriously. Is that clear? A chorus of "Yes, sir" filled the room. Keller turned to me. Colonel, you have the brief. He left without another word, but his message couldn't have been clearer. This is her house. Respect it. I stood, connected my tablet to the display, and brought up the first operational scenario. We have 3 missions scheduled over the next 6 weeks. Each requires coordinated air-ground integration with 0 margin for error. I pulled up the first mission profile. Operation Copper Dawn. SEAL Team 19 will conduct a high-value target extraction in a denied area. Unit 97 will provide infiltration support, aerial overwatch, and emergency extraction capability. I walked them through the entire operation: approach vectors, communication protocols, contingency plans, risk mitigation strategies. It was thorough, professional, and backed by tactical analysis that left no room for argument. Commander Riker raised his hand. Yes, Commander? The infiltration approach. You have us going in from the north. The southern approach is more direct. The southern approach also takes you through a valley with limited maneuver space and extended exposure time. We reviewed that exact scenario 3 months ago, if you recall. The silence that followed was profound. Every SEAL in the room remembered that exercise. Remembered the dismissal. Remembered being wrong. The northern approach adds 12 minutes to insertion time, Riker said carefully, and reduces aircraft exposure by 90 seconds and provides multiple evasion routes if you're compromised. Mission success isn't measured by speed, it's measured by completion. He didn't have a response to that. I continued the briefing, fielding questions with the kind of assured competence that comes from knowing your material and controlling the room. Several times, SEALs challenged aspects of the plan. Each time, I responded with data, analysis, and alternative options that demonstrated Unit 97 had already considered every angle. By the end of the 90-minute session, the challenges had stopped. As people filed out, Lieutenant Moreno approached. "Ma'am, that was impressive. The level of detail in the planning. It's my job, Lieutenant." "I know. I just mean," he hesitated. "I'm glad you're here. Genuinely." Commander Riker was the last to leave. He paused at the door. "Colonel, about our previous working relationship is history, Commander. We're starting fresh. Professionally." He nodded slowly. "Understood. And for what it's worth, that briefing was exactly what this task force needed." After everyone left, I sat alone in the empty operations center and allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just the quiet knowledge that I'd been right all along about my capabilities, and now everyone else would know it too. My father's name hadn't come up once in the entire briefing. Nobody had called me Daddy's girl. I was Lieutenant Colonel Torrance, commander of Unit 97. Finally. The first week of operations established a pattern. SEAL Team 19 would propose mission parameters. Unit 97 would analyze, adjust, and implement the air support profile. What could have been contentious became collaborative because I'd removed ego from the equation. When Riker's team suggested a modification that improved efficiency, I incorporated it and credited them in the planning documents. When my pilots identified a flaw in the ground team's approach, I presented it with solutions rather than criticism. Command wasn't about being right, it was about achieving the mission. But respect, I learned, wasn't automatic even with proven competence. The incident happened during Operation Copper Dawn's execution. The SEAL team was 3 hours into their infiltration when their target unexpectedly relocated to a secondary site. Riker radioed for immediate extraction and redeployment, requesting a flight profile that would cut response time in half. It would also require my pilots to fly a low-altitude approach through an area with known air defense capabilities. Negative, Thunder 1, I responded from the operations center. That corridor is too hot. We'll extract you via alternate route Bravo. Bravo adds 45 minutes. We'll lose the target. You'll lose more than the target if we lose an aircraft. Route Bravo is the call. There was a pause on the comms. Then, request you reconsider, ma'am. This is a time-sensitive operation. I could hear the frustration in his voice. Could imagine the conversation happening on his end, the Admiral's daughter being overcautious again, letting the target slip because she's afraid to take risks. Major Chin was standing beside me, monitoring the feed. He leaned in quietly. The corridor's risky but not impossible. We could thread it if no. Ma'am, the mission is my responsibility, Major. And I'm not risking a crew on a maybe. I keyed the comm, Thunder 1, Route Bravo is final. Acknowledge. Another long pause. Then, acknowledged. Thunder 1 moving to extraction point Bravo. The mission ultimately succeeded. The target was apprehended at the secondary site because my pilots got the SEAL team there intact, if 45 minutes later than planned. But I knew there'd be questions in the after-action review. There were. The debrief happened at 1800 hours. Riker presented his team's perspective first, and to his credit, he was professional. He outlined what went right, what could improve, and mentioned the extraction routing as a difference in tactical assessment. When it was my turn, I pulled up the threat analysis. The corridor commander Riker requested us to fly had active radar emissions from 2 separate air defense sites. Flying that route would have exposed our aircraft to a 78% detection probability and an estimated 42% engagement probability. I showed the data. Those aren't acceptable numbers for any mission, let alone one where we had a viable alternative. The alternative cost us 45 minutes, one of Riker's senior chiefs said. The alternative preserved a $30 million aircraft and a 2-person crew. The mission succeeded. Those are the metrics that matter. Major General Keller, observing remotely via video link, spoke up. Colonel Torrance is correct. Time sensitivity doesn't override operational security. Commander Riker, your team adapted and completed the mission. That's the mark of professional special operations. Next time, trust your air commander's assessment of air threats. After the debrief, Riker approached me in the hallway. You made the right call, he said quietly. I know. That's not easy to admit. I wanted that faster routing badly enough that I wasn't seeing the full risk picture. That's why we have different specialties. Your focus is the target. Mine is getting you there and back alive. He nodded, then surprised me. I owe you an apology. Not for today, for 3 months ago. The way my team and I treated you at the Joint Ops base, the dismissiveness, the comments. That was unprofessional and wrong. It was. I think he paused, choosing words carefully. Your father's reputation is so huge in the SEAL community that when we saw his daughter, we assumed you were trading on his name rather than building your own record. We were wrong. You're one of the best tactical officers I've worked with, and that has nothing to do with who your father is. It was the acknowledgement I'd been waiting years to hear. The validation that I was competent independent of my lineage. It felt smaller than I'd expected. I appreciate that, Commander. If there's anything I can do to make up for there is. Stop apologizing and focus on the next mission. Professional coordination moving forward. That's all I need. Over the following month, the dynamic shifted completely. Riker's team started seeking Unit 97's input during planning rather than after. They trusted my tactical assessments. They incorporated our recommendations. The missions ran smoother, safer, more efficiently. Lieutenant Moreno transferred his enthusiasm from my father's legend to Unit 97's actual performance. During one planning session, he referenced a tactical approach the Admiral's daughter had developed, then immediately corrected himself. Sorry. I mean, Lieutenant Colonel Torrance. It's fine, Lieutenant. It's not. You're not your father's shadow. You're your own commander. The validation came from unexpected places, too. An Army Ranger battalion we'd supported sent a formal commendation for Unit 97's performance. A Marine Force recon team requested us specifically for their next operation cycle. Word spread through special operations circles. Unit 97 was the air asset everyone wanted. Not because of my last name. Because of our results. 6 weeks into command, Major Chin handed me a message from Air Combat Command. Unit 97's operational effectiveness ratings had increased 38% since I'd taken command. We were now the highest-rated rapid response air unit in the entire command structure. Congratulations, ma'am. You're officially running the best tactical air operations unit in the Air Force. It was exactly what I'd told General Keller I wanted to do. But something was nagging at me. I'd proven my competence, earned respect from people who'd dismissed me, built a unit that exceeded every metric. And yet, late that night, alone in my office, I found myself staring at my father's contact information again. I hadn't called him since taking command. Hadn't told him about the assignment, the successes, the vindication. I typed out a message. Thought you should know I'm commanding Unit 97 now. Going well. I stared at it for 10 minutes before deleting it. Because something had crystallized over the past weeks. I'd spent my entire career trying to escape my father's shadow, to prove I was more than the Admiral's daughter. And I'd succeeded, but only by building authority so absolute that it couldn't be questioned. I'd had to become unchallengeable to be seen. And that realization felt less like victory and more like exhaustion. The knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. Major Chin. Ma'am, didn't expect you to still be here. Could say the same about you, Major. Flight line inspections ran long. He paused. Everything okay? You seem preoccupied. I considered deflecting, then decided against it. Chin had earned honesty. Can I ask you something off the record? Of course. When you found out who my father was, did it change how you saw me? He didn't answer immediately, which I appreciated. Meant he was actually thinking about it. Honestly? Yes. At first. I wondered if you'd gotten command through connections rather than capability. He held up a hand before I could respond. But that lasted about 3 days. After that first unit briefing, after watching you work, it became clear that you're here because you're exceptional at this job. Your father's irrelevant. Is he though? Would I have been given this opportunity if I didn't have something to prove? If I wasn't trying so hard to step out of his shadow that I pushed myself beyond normal standards? Does it matter? The work is excellent either way. It matters to me. Chin sat down without asking permission. Ma'am, every commander has something driving them. Some are trying to prove they're tough enough. Some are compensating for failure somewhere else in their career. Some are genuinely patriotic. Whatever your driver is, legacy, or proving independence, or anything else, it's made you into someone who holds herself to impossible standards. Unit 97 benefits from that. But I shouldn't have to be impossible to be respected. No, you shouldn't. But that's the military. That's any organization. Everyone has to be twice as good at something to overcome whatever bias exists against them. Women have to be more competent than men to be seen as equally competent. Minorities have to work harder for the same recognition. And children of legends have to be extraordinary to be seen as anything other than their parents' offspring. That's not fair. No, ma'am. It's not. But you've turned that unfairness into excellence. Maybe that's its own kind of victory. After he left, I sat with that thought. Maybe he was right. Maybe the path to respect was never going to be fair, and excellence was the only response available. Or maybe I'd just accepted a broken system because I'd figured out how to succeed within it. I still didn't call my father. But I did pull up the personnel files for every officer in Unit 97 and start reading. Not their qualifications, I knew those. Their backgrounds. Where they came from. What they'd overcome to get here. Every single one had a story. Every single one had something they'd had to prove. We were all fighting to be seen as ourselves rather than whatever assumption people projected onto us. The difference was I'd finally won that fight. The question was whether winning it had cost me something important. I didn't have an answer yet. Operation Midnight Griffin changed everything. The mission brief came through at 0200 hours on a Tuesday, flash priority, immediate planning required. A high-value intelligence target had been located in a hostile territory with a narrow extraction window. SEAL Team 19 would conduct the snatch. Unit 97 would provide insertion, overwatch, and extraction. Standard special operations tempo, plan fast, execute faster, improvise constantly. The complication, the target was located in an urban environment with significant civilian population and multiple potential hostiles. The extraction window was 4 hours from mission brief. And the requested flight profile required threading through a complex air defense network that made the previous hot corridor look like a training exercise. I assembled my team at 0230. Major Chin and my 3 senior pilots reviewed the intelligence package while I ran probability models. This is aggressive, Chin said quietly. Maybe too aggressive. What's the detection probability? North approach? 85%. South approach? 92%. Engagement probability? If they detect us? 60%, maybe higher. These aren't training systems. This is modern air defense with competent operators. I studied the map. There was a third option, an eastern approach that used terrain masking and required flying nap of the earth through a mountain pass in darkness. It was technically possible, but extraordinarily dangerous. What about Route Echo? My senior pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Vance, looked at me like I'd suggested flying backwards. Ma'am, Echo requires threading a canyon at night, in a hostile environment, with zero margin for error. If anything goes wrong, navigation error, mechanical issue, weather change, there's no recovery option. But what's the detection probability? Effectively zero. We'd be below their radar horizon the entire approach. Then that's our route. Ma'am, Chin started. I know what I'm asking. But the alternatives guarantee detection, and detection means engagement, and engagement means we lose birds and crews. Echo is risky, but it's the only approach that gives us a real chance of mission success without casualties. Vance studied the profile again. I'll need our most experienced pilots. And I'll need to lead it personally. Negative. I'm flying lead. The room went quiet. Ma'am, you're the unit commander, Chin said. You don't need to, I'm also the most experienced pilot in this unit with this type of terrain approach. I flew similar profiles in Afghanistan. I know this flying. And I'm not asking anyone to do something I won't do myself. At 0300 hours, I briefed the Joint Task Force on the plan. Riker listened with increasing concern, then pulled me aside after. That eastern approach is borderline insane. It's calculated risk. It's threading a needle in the dark while people shoot at the needle. The alternatives are worse. He studied my face. You're sure about this? I'm sure. And if something goes wrong? Then it's my responsibility. But nothing's going to go wrong. I wish I'd been right. The insertion went perfectly. We flew Route Echo in complete darkness, using night vision and terrain-following radar to navigate the mountain pass. My hands were steady on the stick, my breathing controlled, my mind processing dozens of inputs simultaneously. This was what I'd trained for. This was why I'd pushed myself beyond normal standards. We deposited the SEAL team at the target site and moved to an overwatch position. The extraction was planned for 60 minutes later, depending on how quickly they could acquire the target. 42 minutes in, everything fell apart. The target had security we hadn't known about. The SEAL team got compromised during extraction and found themselves in a running firefight through an urban environment. Riker radioed for immediate emergency extraction, not at the planned site, but from an alternative location 3 kilometers away. The problem: getting to the new extraction point required flying over the defended area we'd specifically avoided. Thunder 1, we can't reach that extraction point without flying through the air defense network. We're taking effective fire, Falcon 1. We need extraction now. I ran the calculations in my head. The alternative extraction sites were all too far. The SEAL team would be overrun before they could reach them. The only viable option was the one that would expose us to the exact risk I'd spent all morning trying to avoid. All Falcon elements, prepare for hot extraction. We're going through the front door. Ma'am, Vance started over the internal comm execute. We dropped into the urban environment at full speed, flying between buildings to mask our approach. The air defense systems lit us up immediately, radar locks from 3 different sites, missile warnings screaming in my headset. I jinked hard right, then left, then dove 20 meters to break the lock. My wingman, Captain Torres, flew perfect formation off my wing despite the chaos. Thunder 1, we're 30 seconds out. Mark your position. Riker popped smoke. I saw it rising between 2 buildings and adjusted approach. That's when the shoulder-fired missile launched. I saw it on my threat display before I saw it visually, a heat signature rising fast from a rooftop. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide, evade and abort the extraction, or maintain approach and hope my countermeasures worked. I pickled flares and chaff while maintaining my approach vector. The missile tracked the flares and detonated 50 meters behind me. The shockwave rattled my aircraft, but didn't hit anything critical. We landed in the street. The SEAL team sprinted from cover, dragging their target between them. 5 seconds to load. 10 seconds. 15. We're up, Riker shouted. I pulled collective and pushed forward, accelerating out of the kill zone. 2 more missile warnings. More flares. More chaff. Torres's bird took fragmentation damage from an explosion but stayed airborne. We cleared the urban area and dropped back into terrain-following mode, racing through the darkness toward friendly airspace. Nobody spoke for 5 minutes. There was just the sound of engines, warning systems resetting, and heavy breathing over the comms. Finally, Riker's voice, Falcon 1, Thunder 1. That was the most professional flying I've ever witnessed. Just doing my job, Thunder 1. But my hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with decision-making. I'd made the right call, the only call, but it had been close. Too close. We landed back at base at 0700 hours. The debrief ran until noon, analyzing every decision point, every risk calculation, every moment where things could have gone differently. General Keller attended remotely again, watching in silence until the end. Colonel Torrance, your decision to fly through the Air Defense Network. Walk me through that calculation. I explained the alternatives, the time constraints, the risk versus mission analysis. He listened without interrupting. You put yourself and your crews in significant danger. Yes, sir. For a SEAL team that, 3 months ago, treated you with considerable disrespect. That's irrelevant, sir. They were compromised in a hostile environment. Extraction was the mission. Personal history doesn't factor into operational decisions. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that's exactly the right answer. Well done, Colonel. After the debrief, I found Lieutenant Moreno waiting outside the operations center. He looked like he'd been there for hours. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what you did today, flying into that kill zone when you could have aborted, he stopped, composing himself. I spent months thinking you got your positions because of your father. I was wrong. You're not his shadow. You're not his equal. You're your own kind of leader. It was meant as a compliment, and I took it as one. But as I walked back to my quarters that evening, exhausted and still processing the day's events, I realized something had shifted. I'd spent my entire career trying to prove I wasn't just the Admiral's daughter. And I'd succeeded by becoming the kind of commander who'd fly into a kill zone to save people who'd dismissed her. That wasn't about legacy anymore. That wasn't about proving anything. That was just who I was. The question was whether I'd had to become this person because of my father's shadow, or whether I'd become this person despite it. I still didn't have an answer. But maybe the answer didn't matter as much as I'd thought it did. Maybe excellence was its own justification, regardless of where it came from. I called my father that night. First time in months. Anna, good to hear from you. Hey, Dad. Got a minute? Always. What's going on? I told him about Unit 97, about the mission, about nearly getting shot down in an urban kill zone. He listened without interrupting, the way he always did when I was actually telling him something important. Sounds like you made the right calls, he said when I finished. I did. But I keep wondering, would I have made those same calls if I wasn't trying to prove I'm as good as you? Long pause. Then, Anna, I need you to understand something. I've never compared you to me. I've only ever watched you be exceptional at this job and been grateful that you chose to serve. Everyone else compares me to you. Everyone else is irrelevant. The only opinion that matters is yours and the people whose lives depend on your decisions. And from what you just told me, those people think you're doing fine. Better than fine, actually. There you go. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important and everything important. When we hung up, I felt lighter somehow. Not because he'd said anything profound, but because I'd finally let him see the officer I'd become without filtering it through fear of comparison. I was Lieutenant Colonel Anna Torrance, commander of Unit 97, daughter of Rear Admiral James Torrance. All of those identities were true. None of them were the whole story. And maybe that was okay. The formal commendation ceremony happened 6 weeks later at Nellis Air Force Base. Unit 97's performance during Operation Midnight Griffin had earned us a unit citation and several individual medals for valor. General Keller flew in personally to present them. The assembled audience included personnel from across Joint Task Force Peregrine, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force. SEAL Team 19 sat in the second row. I stood at attention while Keller pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to my uniform and read the citation. It detailed the mission's complexity, the calculated risk of the extraction, the successful completion despite hostile fire. What it didn't mention was that I'd spent 2 decades preparing for that moment. That every training flight, every difficult decision, every time I'd been dismissed and proven my dismissers wrong had built toward the capability to make that call and execute it successfully. I stood in the officers' club after the ceremony, making the rounds, thanking my unit, coordinating with commanders, accepting congratulations. Commander Riker approached with his senior enlisted, the same ones who dismissed me months ago. Colonel, my senior chief has something he'd like to say. The senior chief came to attention. Ma'am, on behalf of SEAL Team 19, I want to thank you for putting your lives on the line for my team. That extraction was, he paused, clearly uncomfortable with emotion. You're the best air commander we've ever worked with. Period. I appreciate that, Senior Chief. Your team's performance under fire was exceptional. Made the extraction possible. Still, when you flew into that kill zone, you didn't have to do that. You could have ordered another aircraft to take the risk. No, I couldn't. I was the most qualified pilot for that approach. Command doesn't mean delegating risk, it means assuming it when necessary. Lieutenant Moreno approached after they left. He'd just made Lieutenant Junior grade. Ma'am, can I ask you something? How do you do it? Separate the mission from the personal? When Riker's team treated you badly months ago, and then you flew into hostile fire to save them, how do you not let the personal affect the professional? Because the mission isn't about me. It's about getting people home alive. The moment I let personal feelings compromise operational decisions is the moment I become unfit for command. He nodded slowly. I'm putting in a transfer request. To Unit 97. If you'll have me, you're a SEAL. Unit 97 is Air Force. I know, but I want to learn from someone who commands the way you do. Whatever branch that requires. I thought about what it meant that someone who'd idolized my father now wanted to learn from me. Not because of my last name, but because of my leadership. Submit the request. I'll review it. The reception wound down around 2200 hours. I was preparing to leave when I noticed a figure in navy dress uniform near the entrance. Older, graying, wearing a rear admiral's shoulder boards. My father had come. I walked over, genuinely surprised. Dad, didn't know you were here. Wouldn't miss it. You did good, Anna. Just following your example. No. He shook his head firmly. You're not following my example. You're setting your own. That mission you flew, I read the classified brief. I wouldn't have done what you did. I would have delegated it. Sent someone else into that kill zone while I directed from command. You chose to fly it yourself because you were the best option. That's not my leadership style, that's yours. I'd spent 20 years trying to differentiate myself from him, and here he was telling me I'd succeeded without even realizing when it happened. The SEAL community still talks about you like your mythology. The SEAL community is going to start talking about you the same way. Different stories, same respect. He paused. I'm proud of you. Not because you've lived up to my legacy, because you've built your own. We stood there in the emptying officers' club, father and daughter, both in uniform, both career military, both shaped by service in different ways. They used to call me the Admiral's daughter, I said quietly. What do they call you now? I thought about the conversations I'd overheard, the reports I'd read, the respect I'd earned mission by mission. They call me Commander. There you go. He left shortly after. I watched him go and realized I'd been carrying a weight I didn't need anymore. I'd proven what I needed to prove to him, to myself, to everyone who'd ever seen his shadow before they saw me. The next morning, I returned to Unit 97's Operations Center. Major Chen had coffee waiting and mission briefs that needed review. This was the work. Not the ceremonies, not the recognition, not the vindication. Just the daily execution of command, the constant balance of risk and mission, the responsibility for lives and outcomes. This was what I'd built, what I'd earned, what I'd become. A year later, I received notification that I was being considered for promotion to full colonel, 06. I wasn't nervous. My record spoke for itself. Unit 97 had become the highest-rated rapid response air unit in Air Combat Command. Our mission success rate was 97%. Our safety record was immaculate. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at Nellis. General Keller would preside. The night before, I called my father. Big day tomorrow, he said. Feels like the culmination of everything somehow. Like this is the rank where I finally outrun the shadow. Anna, you outran the shadow years ago. You've just been too busy to notice. Maybe he was right. The ceremony was small. Just Unit 97 personnel, some Joint Task Force Peregrine leadership, and family. My father attended in civilian clothes. Not the uniform. Not the rank. just as a father watching his daughter's accomplishment. General Keller conducted the ceremony with efficient professionalism. Lieutenant Colonel Anna Torrance has demonstrated exceptional leadership, tactical expertise, and command capability over the past 18 months. It is my honor to promote her to the rank of Colonel, United States Air Force. He pinned the Colonel Eagles to my shoulders. The room applauded. My unit stood at attention with the kind of pride that comes from working for someone you respect. Commander Riker attended the reception with Lieutenant Moreno, who'd successfully transferred to Unit 97 as an inter-service liaison officer. Congratulations, Colonel. Well deserved. Thank you, Commander. That first briefing, when you took command of Unit 97 and laid out the mission parameters, that was the moment everything changed. Because you didn't gloat. Didn't make it about revenge or proving us wrong. You just executed professionally and let the work speak for itself. That taught me more about leadership than any manual ever did. Leadership isn't about being right. It's about achieving the mission while bringing everyone home. Later, I found myself alone on the flight line. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the aircraft in orange and gold. My nameplate, Colonel A. Torrance, caught the last light. Major Chin found me there. We stood in companionable silence, watching the day end. Can I ask you something? I said. When you met me, when you first learned who my father was, did you think I'd be this good? He considered it. Honestly, I didn't know. I've served with people born into legacy who felt they had to be twice as good to justify their position. You're that person. You took the weight of that name and turned it into motivation to be exceptional. I spent 20 years resenting that weight. And now I realize it wasn't the weight I resented. It was the assumption that the weight defined me. Once I proved it didn't, once I built something that was entirely mine, the weight stopped mattering. I walked down the flight line alone, past the row of aircraft that represented everything I'd built. Unit 97. My command. My legacy. Not Admiral Torrance's daughter. Just Colonel Torrance. 20 years ago, I joined the Air Force to prove I was more than my father's daughter. I'd done that. Not by running from his shadow, but by building something bright enough that the shadow became irrelevant. And if people wanted to mention that I was Admiral Torrance's daughter, that was fine. Because now, when they talked about the Admiral, they'd sometimes mention that I was his daughter too. The shadow worked both ways now. I'm Colonel Anna Torrance. I didn't outrun the shadow, I built something brighter. If this hit home, tap like and subscribe. I share real stories about leadership, boundaries, and earning respect. Tell me in the comments, when were you written off because of your name, rank, or past, and how did you answer it? What boundary did you set that finally changed the dynamic? If you were in that briefing room, how would you have handled the daddy's girl moment? Does respect come from title first or performance first in your world? Have you ever led people who didn't want to follow what won them over? Would you have made the same call on that hot extraction? Why or why not? And before you go, where are you tuning in from?